but let's talk about Luther Burden out of Missouri, a guy that had a lot of hype before the season, has had a lot of hype dating back to his high school career, but is ending his collegiate career on a bit of a sour note. I have a lot of thoughts about Burden, Charles. I'm very curious to see where you come down on, I think maybe the most confusing evaluation in this class.
This might get me slandered by, my friends that I talk to about the draft the most, but I still like Luther Burden. But I also never viewed him as like, I also never viewed him as like, man, there were people coming into the season, they're calling him potentially the best player in the draft. Like, I thought that was insane. Even like last summer, he's a quality player. I think he's a starter. I like what he does with the ball in his hands. I think he's a quality route runner, maybe not the best route runner, but what I think happened this year, honestly, with him, and I don't, like, one of the worst parts to me about draft season is like when you're sitting around making excuses for guys that you like, and I'm about to do that here.
Yes.
The quarterback play. Holy crap, bro. Like that's another guy, Brady Cook, in the same breath as the Arizona quarterback we talked about earlier. Brady Cook was supposed to be a guy this year who had like potential like mid-round ability as far as the NFL goes. Because I swear to God, if you go back to 2023, he did not look like that. I don't know what happened to him this year, but it's kind of like the Carson Beck conundrum. Something happened where he fell off a cliff because boy, oh boy, was he bad. And like bad in a way where, you have whatever you think about Luther Burden as a draft prospect, he's undeniably one of the best players in college football. And they struggled to like generate offense with him. It's something that they didn't, that was not an issue a year before when he was lighting the world on fire. So to me, the Luther Burden situation became a thing of perception versus reality. I've always been in the minority or in the camp that he's close to like a late first, early second round kind of player. But I do think that there's just a lot of value for having a player like that who is explosive with the ball in his hands, who has a nose for big plays, who has a nose for the end zone. And while I know last year didn't go as he was planning, I do think a lot of that can just be chalked up to situation. And maybe that showed to a lot of people he's probably not like this dominant number one receiver that you were thinking of coming into the year. But I don't think that's necessarily a knock on like who he is as a prospect. I still think he's a starting slot receiver in the league, someone that can win over the middle of the field. And if you can get the ball in his hands in some creative ways, it can be a source of big plays for you.
Yeah. The reason I called him like the most confusing evaluation in this class is because I actually kind of think that he has the highest ceiling of any of these non-Travis Hunter guys. Now, but is he going to get to that ceiling? That I actually think is a Luther Burden question, which we'll come back to in just a second. But like when you're just looking at him, like you mentioned him as a route runner, I actually thought he has some very brief flashes of really good quality man coverage beating routes, but they are flashes. I mean, look, the out route success rate really shows it. Like he can snap off routes that break to the outside extremely well against man coverage from the slot. You just don't see a lot of it. Like he ran more routes against zone than almost any other prospect I've charted since I've been doing college prospects because of the role that he's playing in as almost a pure slot receiver. And he gets a lot of these like Mickey Mouse touches. Now he's not a Mickey Mouse receiver. I think he's got a lot more potential than one of those guys because he shows you like, I would call him like Bud Light Malik Neighbors flashes when he's running routes from the slot, but they're very few and far in between. You got to go hunt for him. I think he does not have a very good feel for zone coverage. I also think his effort is not great. Like I hate to say that stuff about players, but you can see that for him, man. Dude, I'm gonna be a boomer for a second because like you absolutely see it at times with him where he just like runs into guys against zone coverage and then just that's it. Like plays over. And, obviously there are some character concerns with him just in terms of stuff like that. Not that he's like a bad guy or anything, but just how dialed in is he? People do have those questions. Like they again, that's out there with him. And it's I think the biggest reason that he is considered more of a second round prospect than a first round prospect. Like I said, how good is Luther Burden going to be? That's up to Luther Burden. Like I think if he locks all the way in, he could be like a maybe a Bud Light Malik Neighbors, or like a better man coverage version of Rashee Rice, or like a souped up Khalil Shakir. And that player's really valuable in today's league. Like Chris Godwin, I'm not saying he's Chris Godwin because he doesn't play with the same like tenacity as a blocker or anything of that nature, but man, that type of player was on pace to be the best and most productive receiver in the league before Chris Godwin got hurt. When we're talking about these teams, too high shells, all these things, like how can you create explosives? You get the ball in Luther Burden's hand because he can get open on his own in addition to created touches. Like, again, that ceiling is very, very high. I just think the floor on him is also pretty low for both on and off field reasons.
Oh, yeah. I would agree with that. I think the floor is low. And I do ultimately think that if he ends up in round 2, that's fine. I think that's perfectly fine for where he's at right now. But I'm with you. I still think there's some untapped upside here. And I think that the zone stuff, the point about him seeing so much zone is funny because it's like college defenses. They there's kind of like 2 ways to attack these quarterbacks that just aren't very good. You can blitz them. Like sometimes, like that's what teams like Georgia and like Penn State will do. Like, oh, you suck. Like, man, we're just gonna kill you. Then that's fine. But there's also teams that they'll just sit back and just drop 8 in coverage, and quarterback can't do nothing, and you just kind of live like 4 yards at a time through the air. I do think just in a more maybe competent passing game, he'll look better in the NFL, but. I don't have him like if we're just looking at like the slot guy we talked about. Like I don't think he's as good as like Buka. I think he's got the upside to be a really good pro, but just not quite there yet. Like this is someone where like like Luther Burden can't be the first person you add to your wide receiver room, in my opinion. Like you would need to add a couple guys because he's not going to be, at least off the bat, someone that can really carry a passing offense from a volume standpoint.
Yeah. All right. I think we're kind of in lockstep here, but I'm curious to see if we can get Charles to boo me again on my own show. That's a highlight of draft season so far. You know what though? I deserved it. I can't.
Yeah, you got old there.
That was like we're gonna see some grays up here pretty soon. That was a tough look for me.